I think a lot of writers also love film. I know I do, and I always love film almost as much as books. It doesn't have quite the interiority. It can't quite get into you, right? You kind of leave it a bit behind. It's a very communal experience usually as well. But I'd always loved cinema to the extent that I minored in film studies at university and have always studied film. And I really love Italy. Rome is probably my favorite city, and I've been there several times. It's very important for my family, a place where my husband and I renewed our wedding vows in Tuscany. So it's a really, I think, just one of the most beautiful, magical places in the world. So again, I started this book 3 years ago. So it was May of 2021. So it's still somewhat of a COVID era. And I really wanted to go somewhere beautiful and, for me, exotic and transporting. So I very strategically was like, I would love to write a book set in Italy. So I remember watching a Francois Truffaut film, Day for Night, and there was all these script girls running around, and it's the behind the scenes making of a movie. In books about film and music, it's hard. It's hard to pull off the magic of another medium. So people aren't exactly clamoring necessarily for books about movie making, ironically. But I remember thinking, I really want to write a book that is set in the movie industry, even if that's not its raison d'etre. And I want that to be the backdrop. In the 1950s, the mid 50s, the beginning of that incredible time in Italy that's going to lead to the liberation of having divorce and other things in 10 to 15 years. Like, Italy was, women had only had the vote for, I think, 10 years at this point, et cetera, in the time of my book. So it was a country that was still in flux and going through its own internal evolution and revolution with its people, especially its women. So I really wanted to set Vivian, this very renegade character from Bloomsbury Girls, I thought would be such a great character to kind of, drop into Rome in film. She has this gift with dialogue that everyone has mentioned. She's tried playwriting, it's not going well. And so there was a lot of appeal for me with Rome being the focus of the next book. And it was a bonus that Peggy Guggenheim, who had been in Bloomsbury Girls, has this incredible home that she also, a palazzo that she also opens to the public as a museum a few days a week in Venice at that time. So I was like, oh, Peggy can come back. That's great too. I had also been impacted by a Netflix documentary called Five Came Back, which was about five of my favorite film directors, especially George Stevens, who is present filming on the day of the concentration camps being liberated. And I was very affected by that documentary and the book. So the 1950s are such an important time in the world of Hollywood and international film. And there was a lot of behind the scenes financing, and countries were having treaties on filmmaking together. I think Italy and maybe Spain. Germany and Italy and America had always been some of the countries that were the biggest consumers of movies in the world and understood their power. And I really was being taken like for this really wonderful journey of exploring how film was reflecting but also moving forward, people in these different countries through the experience of watching in tandem with perhaps censorship, which is what Italy was experiencing. The Vatican still had a presence on the censorship committee, still could input on what stories they wanted to be told. And what was interesting to me about this time in filmmaking was, if you look at it historically, there were a few movies that were made at the tail end of World War II. Part of that getting people back on the home front, back to normal, so such as The Best Years of Our Lives. But then there's like a little bit of a pullback as people want to have very naturally lighter entertainment and, those Bible epics and the Sunny Singing in the Rain musicals and all that wonderful, wonderful stuff that I eat up and love. And then there's going to be in the late 50s and the 60s, this sort of entrance into a darker way, like using film to explore darker subjects. And so there's a period in time that I thought was a really neat nexus to sort of like settle on and pick at and kind of figure out, tease it. As a historical fiction author, I think what I'm most interested in are the fault lines. So like after the trauma, seeing the little cracks that are left in our lives that we have to navigate and that might trip us up. We might fall into them. And how do you avoid that? And what you have to pull out from your inner spirit to move forward. And I remember thinking that the 1950s were a time where a lot of people were trying to just ignore, not remember, not memorialize. And I really want to explore the dangers of that and the benefit for society when we create art, whether it's film or books, that acknowledges the past, takes some ownership for it, but also helps give us a map for moving forward.